Thank you, I think, for that. You can understand why I wanted to do this. He's a wonderful friend, wonderful surgeon, and a very clever and gifted presenter. Great pleasure to serve as your president this year. It's really been a tremendous year, I think, for the Congress, and it's been a great pleasure for me. I'm going to say more about the Congress in a minute, but I learned a lot of things from one of our former presidents, Claude Organ. One thing I learned from Dr. Organ was that in a situation like this, a presidential address or something of the sort, the first thing that one should do is take care of business. And the first business I'd like to take care of is my family. My mother and father have long since passed, but it's because of my parents and because of the time and the place where I grew up that is really attributable for anything good that I've done or become. My sister Jan, who's with us today, in her professional life, she was an attorney. In spite of that, she's actually relatively honest, intelligent, and we disagree on a lot of things, but we can have fun and laugh at everything. Jan, you stood with me through truly the darkest days of my life, and I appreciate it. My son John the Fourth, very cleverly named, John Rex Potts the Fourth, lots of originality there. He is as handsome, as intelligent, as motivated, as hardworking as any father could want in his son. John was an honors graduate at Strake Jesuit in Houston, where he was also a lacrosse player, an all-state lacrosse player. He then graduated from SMU, and he now works for Mark Cuban in Dallas. John, thank you for being here. My daughter Dale, beautiful. You've already seen pictures of her. Intelligent, hardworking, motivated, kind, wonderful girl. Graduated with honors at Episcopal High School in Houston, where she also ran track and did really well in the sprints and long jump. Also attended SMU, graduated there with honors, and now works for J.P. Morgan in Houston. So Dale, thank you for being here. Oh, my wife, Annie. I'll tell you a secret if it's not, most of you don't know this about Annie. She's a little younger than I am. Even the PA didn't like that one. You know, Billy showed a picture of Red Duke marrying Annie and me. And Red had a phrase that would really apply to Annie. That woman is stronger than an acre of garlic. She is incredibly bright, organized, fun, organized, motivated, organized. And if I didn't mention it, she's really, really well organized in everything that we do. Wonderful woman, and the mother of our children, Charlotte and James. Charlotte and James couldn't be here today. They have scheduled pooping in Chicago, so they're not with us. Now, Jan is the only sibling that I have who could prove up under DNA analysis. However, along the way in my career, I've discovered that I have some brothers. One of those is Dr. Ken Sharp. Ken and I met on what was the first day as faculty members for each of us at Vanderbilt University a number of years ago. Ken's gone on to accomplish great things. He was one of the early leaders of the Association for Surgical Education. He is a past president of the Southeastern Surgical. He was the executive director of the Southeastern Surgical for a number of years, and he is a senior director of the American Board of Surgery. So Ken, Jane, thank you for being here. Dr. Joe Kofer is another one of my brothers. Joe and I met over breakfast 25 or so years ago, became fast friends. and have had a lot of parallels in our lives. Joe's been a past president of the Association of Program Directors in Surgery. He's a past director of the American Board of Surgery and a past chair of the American Board of Surgery. And I think one of the most important things that Joe's ever done is that he really established and continues to lead the Surgical Quality Initiative for the state of Tennessee. And I think that's a tremendous, tremendous service to the state. Well, my third brother, who couldn't be here today, is Dr. Jim Valentine. Jim was a program director for a long time in Dallas at UT Southwestern. We came to know each other that way. Jim is also a past president of the Association of Program Directors in Surgery. He's also a past director of the American Board of Surgery. And very importantly, Jim is president this year of the Western Surgical Association. So those are the brothers that I've come to know that I have through surgery. It's traditional to mention your mentors, and a guy like me needs a lot of mentors, and I've had some good ones. I just want to briefly mention a few. Rainey Williams gave me a job as a resident, and I learned a tremendous amount from Dr. Williams. Dean Warren allowed me to study at his hand for a couple of years, and not only did I learn how to do portal hypertension surgery, but I learned so much about surgery in general and being a leader from Dean Warren. John Sawyers at Vanderbilt gave me my first faculty position and was very, very supportive of my career throughout. But there's one person in particular that I want to mention who I believe is here today. The lights are such that I can't see him in the audience, but I think Dr. Frank Moody is here. Dr. Moody, it's kind of a, yeah, thank you. There you are. Dr. Moody, I'm not even sure he knows this story, but on the day that he called to offer me a position as his research fellow while I was a resident, he saved me from a career as a cardiovascular surgeon. Now that's a long story, but it's a fact. But he let me work in his lab and introduced me to academic surgery, and several years later he hired me as a faculty member when he was chairman at UT Houston. And most importantly, he allowed me to serve as his program director, and that really has made my career. So Dr. Moody, I can't thank you enough, and thank you for all that you underwent to get here to this meeting today. I want to recognize our special guest. He's already introduced himself as the discussant, but Dr. Dave Feliciano is here. Dave, can you just stand up and give us a wave? As you know, Dave is the current president of the Southeastern Surgical Congress. Dave's unique in many ways, but one way in which he is truly unique is that he is the only individual who has been elected president of both the Southwestern Surgical Congress in 1992 and the Southeastern Surgical Congress now in 2016. So Dave, again, thank you for being here. Southwestern, you'll hear this over and over there again during this meeting, but Southwestern is very special to me because, like Billy, like so many people here, this was the first surgical meeting I attended when I was a resident. This was the first meeting in which I gave a scientific paper. The Southwestern has given me lots of other opportunities. Probably most importantly before this was the opportunity to represent you on the American Board of Surgery, which was really tremendous learning experience for me. And now you've elected me to serve as your president, and for that I am ever grateful. I think the Southwestern has accomplished at incredible levels this year. I truly believe, I know I'm biased, but I truly believe we've accomplished at unprecedented levels this year. And for that, we've got a number of individuals to thank. I'm going to start by thanking the entire crew of LP, etc. We changed management firms a number of years ago to LP et cetera, and it's been a tremendous addition for our organization. I think they're top flight. I think they're the exemplar in their industry, and we are really fortunate to have them. They never miss a beat throughout the entire year. I don't know that it's been announced at the meeting, but Noni Lowry, who leads LP et cetera, has some health issues. She was not able to be here today. She's been very gracious about calling, making sure everything's going well. We have a program book that's out at the registration desk of this year's meeting. We would like for every member to sign that program book, and then we'll send that to Noni. So sign the book, give her a good wish along the way. Well, I also have to thank and give appropriate honors to our Council Executive Committee, the entire Council Executive Committee. In particular, I want to acknowledge Clay Cawthorn-Burlew, your President-elect, and also to recognize Dan Margulies, your Vice President. They've done tremendous work all year long for this organization, and the organization is in really good hands going forward with those two as leaders. It's a tremendous program. I think you already would agree with that. For that, we have the program committee to thank, in particular Dr. Truitt, who has just worked tirelessly to make this a fantastic program. I think the Southwestern is unique in the fact that we do have the multi-center trials group that you've heard about already today. I don't know of any other general surgery organization that has such an activity going on. I think it really sets us apart. And again, we want to thank Clay Cawthorn-Burlew for leading that effort, along with all of you who are contributing to that effort along the way. One of the things that I wanted to do when I took over as president was to revise our bylaws. All the pieces were there, but they'd kind of been added ad hoc, and they didn't flow well. They weren't numbered correctly. The language was inconsistent and so forth. So we asked the bylaws committee, headed by Don Leslie, to revise those bylaws. I think the revised bylaws were transmitted to you a few weeks ago, and we will vote on those at the business meeting. So I want to thank Don Leslie for that effort. The GME committee, led by Walt Biffle, will Tuesday present a tremendous GME luncheon on one of the thorniest issues of today, and I'm going to give you a view of that issue later in this talk. Brian Morse was up about 2 hours ago introducing our new members. We have a lot of new members this year, so we're grateful to Brian and the entire membership committee for their efforts. Those new members are the lifeblood of any organization, and they've done a tremendous job this year of bringing us new members. Well, I think one of the things that really keeps the Southwestern Surgical in the public eye, and in the eye of the surgeon around the country, is our presence in the American Journal of Surgery. And that presence is due to the hard work behind the scenes throughout the year of the Publications and Research Committee, which is headed by Dan Vargo, and we are tremendously grateful for all the labor that you put into that. We have greater sponsorship in dollars this year than we've had in years and years. And, you know, it's almost impossible, unfortunately, these days to run a first-rate surgical organization and a first-rate surgical meeting without that kind of outside sponsorship. Our development committee is really responsible for gathering those funds. So to the development committee, consisting of Jim Edney, Shanu Kathari, John Moore, Ken Murayama, and Dmitry Olenikov, we owe a great debt of gratitude. One other thing that I think we've done this year that we've never really done before as an organization is participate in advocacy, not going to the Hill, not contributing to political funds, but advocating within the House of Surgery, within the House of Medicine for things that we thought needed to be said. 1 year ago at this meeting, we were charged with responding to the initiative from the American Society of Anesthesiologists that anesthesiologists serve as the directors of the perioperative surgical home. We were charged to do that in association with the Southeastern Congress, and we did. We wrote to the American College of Surgeons as we were directed to do. You'll recall that the ACS was working with the ASA at that time on a statement about this. But in addition, as we took that initiative, we looked closely at some of the core documents of surgery, such as the principles of the American College of Surgeons, the Booklet of Information of the American Board of Surgery, and the program requirements in surgery, and found that implied but not stated was the leadership role of the surgeon in the continuity of the care of the patient. We all live that, we were all taught that, we all live that, but it's not explicitly stated in those key documents. So we also wrote to those organizations expressing that we felt that those statements should be included, and there's been movement on that front, certainly by the review committee and some consideration by the American Board of Surgery as well. The other item on which we weighed in was in December of 2015, the American Board of Medical Specialties put forth a proposal that the member boards would be able to issue certificates of focused expertise to individuals who had completed non-accredited fellowship programs. We saw that as a threat to the value of the American Board of Surgery certificate, which we all hold, and we saw it as an issue that could further confuse a public that's already confused about the meaning of certification. So we wrote the ABMS in opposition to that, and I'm happy to say that that initiative has now been tabled by the ABMS. Now, in both of these efforts, we engaged not only the Southeastern Surgical, but the other 6 regional general surgical societies, because we feel like those are the organizations that can really speak for general surgeons in America. We don't have an Academy of General Surgery. And we have to remember that the American College of Surgeons has to speak for all surgical specialties, not for general surgery alone. We don't want to create a new organization, but we feel like that mechanism of keeping all of the regional surgical societies in touch, in tune with one another, bringing issues forward for national discussion is a really good one, and one that will carry forward, and I think it may be a real lasting value brought by the Southwestern Surgical this year. By the way, I do have slides for this talk. I just chose not to use them, but I can prove it to anybody who wants to see them. I've got the slides for this. The bylaws, speaking of the bylaws, enlisting the duties of the President say that during the annual scientific meeting, he or she shall deliver an address on such matters as he or she shall deem of importance to the fellows of the Congress. And as you see, I have titled my address, "You Can't Blame the Wreck on the Train." I have no financial disclosures. That's what comes with a life in education, you know. Now, there are a lot of trauma surgeons in this organization, and it's one of the main topics of our meetings every year. But this is not a talk about trauma surgery. There's a saying at the Grand Ole Opry, if anybody ever listens, I still do when I can. There's a saying there that you got to dance with the one who brung you. And the one who brung me was surgical education. What I see is a trauma that is ongoing in surgical education, and that's going to be the topic of this talk. I'll give back 2 points of background. One is, I think you're familiar with both of these, the failure rate on the American Board of Surgery certifying examination over a 6-year period from 2006 to 2012 rose from a previously stable 16% to 28%, a 75% increase in the failure rate on the American Board of Surgery certifying examination over a 6-year period. That doesn't speak well for our residency programs. Also, as you know, some 80% of graduates of general surgery residency programs, 5-year general surgery residency programs, go on and do fellowships. I think that doesn't speak well for our general surgery programs. Now, true enough, some of those individuals have developed a true fascination with a subspecialty and want to go practice that subspecialty. And some of them simply don't want to work as hard as a general surgeon has to work. And so they go into some fellowship where they don't have to work that hard. Some of them have what has now been proven to be the misguided notion that by doing a subspecialty fellowship, they will earn more money in their career. There was a nice paper at the Southeastern Surgical in February that totally debunked that idea, yet some people believe that and go forward with a fellowship because of that. But the sad fact is that a lot of these individuals who pursue fellowship after general surgery training do so because they feel unprepared to go into practice. And there's a lot of data that supports that. You know, Heather Yo's survey of surgery residents, more than 50% said they were unprepared to enter practice. There's the famously quoted fellowship program director survey that was presented to the American Surgical 2013, where they said that 33% of individuals who graduated 5-year general surgery residency programs could not safely do a cholecystectomy, a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. And 2/3 of the graduates, in their estimation, could not operate for 30 minutes unsupervised in a major case. And then the American College of Surgeons Board of Governors did a survey of the governors and of the young surgeons, and among surgeons 45 years and older, 25% felt that the graduates today did not have the judgment to practice independently general surgery. Those are indictments of our surgical education system. So what happened? How did we get there? Well, one factor is that medical students today are not prepared for practice, and they're not even prepared for residency. Most of them have never taken call. They are not prepared for residency. So that glide slope from medical school to independent practice, which still occurs over the same fixed 5 years, is much steeper than it was in the past. We're starting at a much more unprepared resident. The duty hour limitations that were imposed by the ACGME in 2003, for a lot of good reasons, have had some salutary effects, and I don't think are all bad. But there's no question that those duty hour limitations have disrupted the continuity of care paid by our residents, and with that they have disrupted the personal devotion, I'll use that word, of the resident to the care of that patient. So I think that's been detrimental. Our residents remain hospital-based. There are a lot of reasons for that, historical and financial, but our residencies are hospital-based, even though the practice of general surgery is now largely not hospital-based. That is a detriment in our educational system. As very nicely outlined by Frank Lewis and Mary Klingensmith in a paper in 2012, the diseases and conditions that surgeons treat has changed radically over the last 20 or 30 years. And with that, we've had radical changes in the treatments that surgeons apply. Our curricula have really not kept up with that. And that, I think, has been detrimental to our residency education. In fact, curricular development is one of the areas in which we need faculty development. Our faculty development has not kept up with changing educational techniques and techniques that are really more appealing to the residents today. So we need faculty development on that, as well as on the basics of education, of teaching techniques, evaluation, feedback, and so forth. So faculty development, lacking faculty development has been a big factor. But I think that there's a factor that has really adversely impacted our residency programs to a greater extent than all of those other things combined. And that is a lack of appropriate supervision of our residents. Now, the word appropriate in that sentence is very important. It's key. I'm not suggesting that residents should run amok in our programs. They need to be supervised. But the fact is that residents today are not only heavily supervised, they are very heavily supervised, they are over-supervised. They are not appropriately supervised. It's absolutely appropriate that a PGY1 should have close, direct supervision of everything that he or she does. That's absolutely appropriate supervision. But a PGY5, who's only a few months from independent practice, should do most things without direct supervision, should be under indirect supervision or oversight only in most of the things that they do. And along the way, any resident who has repeatedly demonstrated the ability to do a task, whatever that task is, whether it's taking a history or performing a cholecystectomy, if they've repeatedly demonstrated their ability to do that, they should be given the ability to do that without direct supervision. That's the kind of appropriate supervision that I'm talking about. And the number of programs in which that occurs today is unfortunately vanishingly small. I have the opportunity to go around and speak in a lot of residency programs, and I hate to say this, it's just unbelievable to me, but I encounter a number of chief surgical residents just 2 or 3 months from their graduation who have never done an operation without an attending scrubbed with them and across the table from them. They've never done any operation by themselves. That is not appropriate supervision. Well, this loss of autonomy is insidious, and it's been multifactorial in its development. And I just want to kind of run through how I think we got to where we are today. As I said, there are a lot of factors. I'm going to start with one, sort of chronologically. Medicare began paying for residency education in 1965. In 1969, 4 years later, there was a little memo written that was published in the Federal Register that described how teaching faculty should document their interactions with residents in order to bill, and bill appropriately. It was called IL 372. It was in the Federal Register. Nobody knew about it. Nobody paid any attention to it until 1995, when the University of Pennsylvania settled for $30 million with the Department of Justice for what was alleged to be inappropriate physician billing of services that were provided by residents. $30 million. Thomas Jefferson paid $12 million. University of Pittsburgh paid $17 million. University of Virginia paid $8.6 million. There were other such settlements. For good reason, that scared the bejesus out of the deans of these medical schools. But rather than teach their faculty, these are the rules of Medicare billing. Go on and train the residents the way that you've trained the residents, but you have to document things this way. Instead of doing that, they told the faculty, no, you've got to be involved with everything that the residents do. You've got to look over their shoulder with everything that they do. And I think that was where all of this got started. Next is the patient safety movement. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all in favor of the patient safety movement. This began a long time before the 1999 IOM report to Err is Human, but that's the one that really brought it to the public's attention. That's what made patient safety national headline news, was that report. Well, following that, and you've already heard some discussion of this in other papers today, CMS came up with a list in 2008 of 7 never events. If that never event occurs in a patient, CMS doesn't pay for the care of that patient. That list is now expanded to 17 items. Well, what is that? How do the CEOs of your hospitals, how do they respond to that? They respond to that by saying, attending physician, you better be there and you better do that procedure yourself, or make darn sure that it gets done right by providing direct supervision. It's an expected response to the never event. I think, I've already talked a little bit about fellowship training. I think the burgeoning subspecialty training has been a real detriment to resident autonomy. The residents, I should say fellows, take cases from the residents that the residents should be doing, and one that's a little bit more difficult to document, but I think is very, very true, is that the fellowship programs take the attention of the teaching faculty away from the residency program. They occur in the same environments, the fellowships and the residencies, and that's just the natural product. Those fellowship programs take away cases and the attention of the faculty. And the faculty are stretched. I don't have to tell anybody that here. You've got other obligations. You've got administrative obligations to the medical school. You've got administrative obligations to the hospital. You've got other organizational obligations which take your time. And faculty are not paid to teach. Faculty are paid to produce RVUs. Our teaching hospitals have become clinical mills. They're not teaching hospitals, they're clinical mills. Because you're not paid to teach, you're paid to produce RVUs. And a lot of our faculty members see residents as being barriers to maximal RVU production. One other thing I'd talk about is quality metrics. I think, quality metrics are great. I just congratulated Joe on his quality initiatives in the state of Tennessee, and I think we as surgeons need to pursue those quality initiatives. The problem is that the margin for error of any given surgeon is so small on some of those metrics that they're afraid to let residents do things. They're afraid to take a few more minutes in the operating room. They're afraid to have one more wound infection. They're afraid to have one more anastomotic leak because of their quality metrics. And they use that as an excuse to preclude the residents from doing the things that they should do with indirect supervision. So the result of all this is that after a 5-year residency program, we have individuals who have not developed the technical skills, have not developed the judgment, or have not developed the confidence to practice general surgery independently. And as an educator, what's most frightening to me about this is that a fair number of those individuals join our faculty. Poorly trained individuals poorly training the next generation of residents. And that to me is frightening. That is a downward spiral that I don't see having a happy ending. Well, the title. Terry Sharp wrote a song a number of years ago. She was actually driving to a gig somewhere in Texas, And as she did so, she saw this little red sports car approaching a railroad crossing. As the gates were coming down, this little red sports car just dashed right under the gates, just barely being missed by the train. And it occurred to her when she saw that had that car been hit by the train, the family probably would have sued Southern Pacific for that accident. So in true country music fashion, this is a true story, she pulled her car off to the side of the road, pulled a napkin out of the glove box, and started writing this song. And the words are these: when the gates are all down and the lights are all flashing and the whistle is screaming in vain, if you stand on the tracks in spite of the facts, then you can't blame the wreck on the train. And ladies and gentlemen, I think the gates are all down. And I think that the lights are all flashing. And I think that whistle is screaming. And I think there's a wreck coming if we don't get this car off the tracks. So how do we do this? How do we change this momentum that inappropriate resident supervision has caused in our residency programs? Because I think this poses not only a threat to the public, which is real and growing, but I think it poses an existential threat to our profession of surgery. And I think we need to change it, and I've got a few solutions that I would propose to do so. You know, if you want to depress an audience, you talk about the problems. If you want to inspire the audience, you talk about the solutions. So now I'm going to talk about the solutions. These are sort of in three batches, starting with the faculty. The first thing is we need fewer faculty in our programs. Yes, you heard that. You heard that. We need fewer teaching faculty in our programs. The faculty, surgery faculty in allopathic medical schools in this country, the number of surgical faculty has increased by 43% in 10 years. Now, I will warrant you there has not been a 43% increase in the amount of teaching. In fact, what has happened with that 43% increase is all those people are brought on as clinical faculty. They all bring their cases. They're all promised that their cases are going to be covered by a resident. So the residents are running from one doctor to the next, to the next, to the next, to cover those cases. And the teaching physician, or the attending surgeon at least, doesn't know the capability of that resident, doesn't know in what areas they need work, doesn't know what they're capable of doing, cannot provide them with appropriate learning opportunities because these residents are just running from place to place. I think we need smaller teaching faculties in our program. Departments can be as big as the chairman can afford or as the chairman envisions. I don't care how big the department is. I'm talking about the teaching faculty who are allowed to participate in teaching the general surgery residents. Those teaching faculty need faculty development. I've already talked about that. They need basic teaching, basic faculty development on teaching methodologies, on curriculum development, on feedback, on evaluation, and they need to be trained in the proper interpretation of the Medicare rules, which do in fact allow indirect supervision of the residents, and they need to be trained in the ACGME program requirements, which not only allow but encourage indirect supervision of the residents so that they can do the jobs that really need to be done with those residents. Now, those teaching faculty should be paid for their teaching. Where's that money going to come from? It's probably going to come from those other members of the faculty who are not teaching faculty. They're going to have to contribute to a kitty to support the pay of those teaching faculty. Those faculty need to give honest feedback, honest evaluation to the residents. If they see a deficit in a resident and don't correct that deficit and don't report that deficiency, then they are cheating. They're cheating the resident, they're cheating the program, and they're cheating the public. If they don't do their job as a faculty member, and if they don't correct it, at least report that deficiency to the program director in those residents. Now, I'm obviously painting a picture of a situation in which it is a privilege to be a member of the teaching faculty. It should be a privilege. It should be a privilege which is earned, not given. Not every person who is hired by the department should be a member of the teaching faculty. It should be a privilege that's earned and continuously earned based on evaluation, feedback, and so forth. If the faculty are doing their jobs, they can keep being teaching faculty. If they're not, then they need to be remediated. And if they don't remediate properly, then they need to be removed from the teaching faculty. The next bucket is kind of program structure, if you will. And there, I think the most important change, or one of the important changes that need to be made, is in our program's supervision policies. Every program has a resident supervision policy. And I would warrant you that every one of those supervision policies says when a resident may progress to indirect supervision. I think that those policies should be strengthened by also adding when that program or that resident must have indirect supervision. When have they earned the right that the faculty have to give them indirect supervision? And of course, again, we need to educate the faculty in that. Believe it or not, one little change that could be made that would improve our resident education is rotation length. Rotation lengths are generally determined today by service needs. They're not determined on an educational basis. If we make our rotations longer, the faculty will know the residents better, will be able to give better feedback to those residents, be able to give them better learning opportunities simply by adjusting the length of the rotations. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but I think we ought to limit fellowships within the general surgery, within the confines of the building where general surgery residency programs take place. I'm not going to hammer on that one again. I think the programs need to expect the residents to act as teaching assistant in a number of cases. Now, the board and the RRC now have a requirement going forward that residents do this in 25 cases before they graduate. I think that's a step in the right direction. I think it's inadequate. I think we need in our programs to insist that the residents be teaching assistant on a lot more than 25 cases. To teach is to learn twice, and it's going to be much better for that senior resident to recognize his or her deficits when they are chief residents and have the protection of that residency program, and have backup of the faculty, than when they're standing alone in an operating room at night with a sick patient. That's not when they need to recognize their deficits. Certainly the program directors need to accept the personal responsibility to ensure that every individual who leaves their program has demonstrated the capability of functioning independently. Not very many program directors do that today, and that is key. They are the gatekeepers between the residency program and the public. Now, the program director can't do these things alone. The program director has to have a commitment from the chairman, from the dean, if you're in a medical school, and certainly from the hospital CEO, to improve the residency program. And I think that absent that commitment from all those parties, I think my boss would kill me for saying this. Absent that commitment from all of those parties, that program should do the right thing for the residents, should do the right thing for the public, and close their doors. Yes, we need general surgeons in this country. We need them badly. But we need good general surgeons who are well trained. We don't need more surgeons who are trained in sham programs. I think at some level at least all of you understand these things. The surgeons understand these things. You may disagree with you may quibble about some of the details and so forth, but I think at some level you understand what I'm talking about. There are two important groups who don't understand these things that we in the House of Surgery need to educate. The first of those are the CEOs, the deans of our medical schools, the CEOs of our hospitals. They need to understand that we need appropriate supervision of our residents if we're going to produce good surgeons. They need to understand that that may slightly diminish the RVU production of their faculty. It may slightly diminish the quality metrics of the faculty. But it's a good return on investment. It is a good return on investment. Ultimately, we will have better surgeons if we allow appropriate supervision in our programs. The other group that needs to be educated in this is the public. They need to understand that we don't mean to throw patient safety out the window. We want to maintain a focus on patient safety. But the issue is we have to strike a meaningful balance between the safety of that one patient who's in front of a resident today and the safety of all of the patients that that resident will treat during his or her career. We have to strike some meaningful balance there. And again, I think it's a good return on investment to give appropriate supervision. So, I think if we accomplish these things, if we accomplish all of these things, we will have the best surgical training in the world, we'll have the best surgical care in the world, and we will be able to preserve our profession that we all so dearly love. If we fail and we continue to drive appropriate supervision out of our residency programs, then we can't blame the wreck on the train. We saw it coming. We can't blame the wreck on the train. So again, I will thank you very much for the privilege of these remarks. And I thank you ever so much for the privilege of serving as your president. Remember that we're going to have a reception in this room right now, and following that, we will move then to the sponsored poster session in the room next door. Dr. Truitt, do I have any other announcements I need to make? Thank you for your attention.
So Dr. Potts, thank you so much for outstanding presidential address and for the tremendous amount of work over the past year. It's really and truly appreciated. We have your presidential medal, and congratulations.